How's it going, Diablo fans? So today I want to share my ultimate level 1 to 100 leveling guide, and this guide is going to use Firewall Hydra leveling, and we're going to start at level 1 with Helltide leveling, then we're going to do the Enchantment quest, we're going to do the first Capstone at level 35, then we are going back to Helltides, then we're going to do the second Capstone at level 55, then we're going back to Helltides until level 60, and then we're going to go for one Nightmare Dungeon tier 45 to unlock the pit, and then we are going to do the pit from level 60 to level 100. You can use this guide in Eternal Realm and also in Season 4, since Season 4 and Eternal Realm are pretty much going to be the same. Obviously, on the Seasonal Realm, the leveling is going to be a bit faster. And also for this guide, there's a written version available on my website. You can find the link in the description down below. There's the full details with all the planner links and everything from level 1 to level 100. And you want to check out the written guide, you can put it on your second monitor, on your iPad or anywhere else while leveling. Or you might just go with the video guide. Just want to really quickly talk about the synergies and the changes in the leveling processes since the past seasons. So we are taking advantage of the double Hydra. So before we could only get one Hydra, now we can get two Hydras out of the box, and we are taking advantage of the new stat which is called life on hit. So life on hit basically gives us a flat amount of life whenever we do a hit, and as you can imagine, two Hydras are going to shoot 4 projectiles each, so that's basically 8 projectiles every like half second or so, and all these are going to count for life for hit. Furthermore, the firewall ticks are also going to count for life on hit, so we just gonna regenerate a crazy amount of hit points, which is basically making us immortal. Also, it makes it very easy for us to do the Capstone Dungeons, and also makes it very easy for us to farm the pit, since we are just gonna regenerate so much life that we are never gonna get killed by anything. This guide is divided into sections, so make sure to check the links in the description down below to jump right to the section which you are interested in. Also, there's links to all the build planners there. These are also divided within the level ranges, and you can also find the links to all my other build guides down below in the description. Before we are going to start, I want to quickly talk about the legendary aspects which are good for this build. So from Season 4 onwards, we're going to have these aspects in the codex. So since it's going to be random when we acquire each of the aspects, I'm not really making any points within the guide which aspects to use. So basically, I'm just showing you which aspects are good, and whenever you find them, you can just imprint them and use them. So first of all, the Starlight aspect is one of the most important aspects for this build. This is like really, really strong, and it instantly fixes all your resource problems. So what it does is it gives you 20 to 40 primary resource whenever you heal for 25% of your life. As that being said, we are playing life on hit build, so we're gonna heal a lot. So this basically triggers quite often, and 20 to 40 primary resource is actually quite a bit. Then we have the Serpentine aspect. This is the second most aspect you can find. As soon as you can find it, you're gonna get an extra Hydra. It's just gonna make you so much more stronger. It's gonna do additional damage. You're gonna get more mana regeneration and movement speed from your Conjuration Mastery. So as soon as you find Serpentine aspect, definitely use that. Then we have the aspect of Inner Calm. That is definitely a good damage aspect for this build, because we are almost gonna be standing still a lot. Like, for example, if we're doing the Helltide events, we're gonna stay still, or in the boss fights in the dungeons, we're gonna stay still. So this is pretty much a very good damage aspect early on. It becomes weaker later and later in the game. Then we have Edgemaster's aspect. We are on full resources a lot of the time, so this is again another free damage buff we can achieve. Together with Wizard, Firewall, and Fury Surge, we are gonna have plenty of mana, and if you have the Starlight aspect, you are gonna have a lot of mana anyway. Then we have the Conceited aspect. It's not that good early because we're not going to have a lot of barrier in the early game, but it's still a great aspect if you have it. Together with the Protection passive and the Ice Armor passive, we're going to have quite a bit of barrier a little bit later into the game, so definitely use this if you find it. Then Flameworker's aspect, it's not really so important, but it gives you extra movement speed. So this is, for example, a good aspect to imprint on your amulet early on, because it gonna gives you a good chunk of extra movement speed when you walk through a firewall, which is actually not a big deal. Then we have the Juggernaut's aspect. This maxes out your armor, period. So if you find it, the evade 100% increased cooldown is really not a big deal. So you would just want to use Juggernaut's aspect. This is gonna cap your armor, and it's gonna make your life in the Capstone Dungeons and also later in the pit like so much easier. Then if you don't have Juggernauts, you can use Disobedience, but I would highly recommend to go for Juggernauts if you have it. And then last but not least, Aspect of the Protector is basically a free barrier you get early on, which kind of synergizes with Conceited Aspect, but it's also, in general, a nice to have. Well, let's just put it like this, right? It's still better than nothing. So one more thing I want to say before we start into the actual guide is Helltide chests. So since this is going to repeat for every single Helltide leveling we are doing, I just want to say this before. So Helltide chest you want to open to the end of the Helltide, because the Helltide chest XP is based on your character level and not based on whenever you collected the cinders. So if you level for 2 or 3 levels before you are actually opening the chest, you're gonna get much more XP out of those. So if you're comfortable holding on to your Helltide cinders, just wait to the very end. But also keep in mind, if you die, it's gonna remove half of your cinders. So really just do this if you're comfortable that you're not gonna die. So we're going to make a new character. We choose the skip campaign option and just give it a random name. Then we choose if we want to play seasonal or eternal. That's pretty much going to be almost the same in season 4, but there's definitely differences here. We pick World Tier 2 and start the game, and then we're going to do in our skill tree, we put 4 into Arclash, 1 into Enhance, 1 into Flickering, and then 1 into Flame Shield, 1 into Teleport, and 2 into Glass Cannon. We will then later spec into Hydra, since we can now have 2 Hydras at a time, and also we're going to spec into Conjuration Mastery, since Conjuration Mastery is going to give us extra mana regeneration and 6% extra movement speed with 2 active Hydras, which is huge at this stage of the game. For these early levels, we are not really looking at gear at all. We're going to pick up rares so we can salvage them later, but mainly we're just looking for a 2-handed stuff, and we're just looking for one single stat, which is going to be Life on Hit. Life on Hit can be on your weapon, on your gloves, on your rings, and on your amulet. And why do we want Life on It? Well, we have the Hydras, which are firing a lot of projectiles, and every single projectile they fire counts for Life on Hit, so it pretty much makes us immortal here. And then we just freely level to level 15. That's not going to take very long. You want to focus on the side events we see right here. So these are these pillar events. They spawn a lot of mobs and are generally very easy to do, especially if you have enough life on hit. Then you can just stand in the mechanics and don't even care. So now we reach level 15, let's port to K Overshot, and then we going to the blacksmith, and next to the blacksmith there's the chest, which gives us our first tempering recipe. That's going to be the natural finesse. So that's we're going to get for free, and that's actually the strongest one because it gives us damage. So what we're going to do is now we're going to temper this on our items, so we can put it on our weapon, on our gloves, and our rings, and our amulet, and we want to hit like a damage stat there. It doesn't matter if it's damage to close, or damage to distant. We just don't want to hit damage through crowd control. So the initial tempering gives us a huge damage buff, and now let's just quickly do the enchantment quest. You can see the location of the enchantment quest on the map right now. If you don't know where it is, then we enter the respec mode. We take out 1 point from Flickering Arclash, 3 from Arclash, and put them into Fireball, Enhanced Fireball, and Greater Fireball. Then don't forget to put Fireball in your enchantment slot, and then we are good to go. So from level 15 to 35, we basically going to prepare for the first Capstone Dungeon. We are going back to Helltide, and we are going to do the farming just exactly the same way like we did it from level 1 to 15. Just a side note here, keep your elixir of resource up at all times. So this elixir is very, very strong early on, and you will find it in the Helltide, but if you don't find it, you can also craft it. You just got to pick up a couple of herbs on your way. It's not a big deal crafting this elixir. For the skill order, we mainly max out our passive Fury Surge for more mana regeneration. We max out Firewall. We finally get Ice Armor and Frost Nova. Then we get our key passive Combustion, and then we continue getting our necessary passives like Soulfire, Worms, Endless Pyre, and Elemental Attunement up and running. So we're looking for a little bit of different gear now. On our armor pieces, we are looking for mana per second, life per second, and maximum life rolls. And on our offensive pieces, we are usually looking for life per hit, mana on kill, and maximum life rolls here. That being said, the life per hit and maximum life rolls and the mana per second rolls are going to be the most important here. But don't sweat it if you can't find those stats. At this stage of the game, it's just something generally looking out for, but it's definitely not a requirement. Just focus on getting as many life per hit stats as possible here. Also, 2 more things. First of all, as soon as you get level 30, don't forget to put the Firewall enchantment. And second, You want to try like every other gear you swap to switch from Wizard Firewall to Mage Firewall, because that's going to give you like a tremendous damage boost, but you want to balance it out. If you have enough resource regeneration so you can feed it, if you don't have enough resource regeneration, just stay on Wizard's Firewall. And that's already everything from level 15 to 35. You're just going to level until you're 35, and then we're going to continue with the first Capstone Dungeon. The first Capstone Dungeon is not going to be a huge issue for you. It is located in Kiovashat. You can see the location on the map right now. You just want to make sure that you switch back to Wizard's Firewall here, because otherwise you're going to get out of mana during the boss fights, most likely. And you don't really need the Fireball enchantment here, so you can definitely switch to the Hydra enchantment if you want. Other than that, the dungeon is pretty easy. Just go through the dungeon, kill the last boss, you're done, switch to World Tier 3. If you want to see a full Capstone Dungeon run, I did actually way earlier on level 30. You can find that in the description down below. And now as we're done with the first Capstone, we're going to switch to World Tier 3, and then we're going to continue with Helltide farming. Helltides in World Tier 3 is not much of a difference to World Tier 2. Just a little side note, at the very beginning, if you just enter it level 35, it's going to be a little bit difficult, and you might have to kite mobs a little bit until you get like decent sacred gear in all of your slots. It's going to take like 15 to 20 minutes maybe, and then it's just going to be just fine like before. Other than that, we still want to focus on the side events, and we still want to focus on keeping the Elixir of Resource up all the time. And you should get through Helltides in World Tier 3 in somewhere around an hour, maximum hour and a half. For our skills, we go in order. We max out Firewall, then we max out Inner Flames, and then we get the defensive passives, Align the Elements, Mana, Shield, and Protection, and then finish it up with Enhanced Frost Nova and Mystical Frost Nova, which is going to help us to do a little bit more vulnerable when we are in the Capstone Dungeon. For gear priorities, we still use the same stuff we used before on our defensive pieces, so we will still want to have mana per second, life per second, and maximum life on our gear, and additionally we want to temper max life. The utility temper doesn't really matter. The only one you have available is Barrier Generation, which doesn't really matter at all, so just focus on the maximum life. You should have it by that time. And for our offensive gear, we still want to focus on life per hit, maximum life, and our third stat now, instead of mana per kill, would be resource cost reduction. For the tempering, again on the offensive items, we can temper the damage. So we can do any of those damage to close or damage to distance. We just don't want to have damage to crowd controlled. And again, the utility role is pretty much irrelevant. And if we can temper resource, we want to again temper resource cost reduction. For our weapon temper, we use Firewall size. We're probably not even going to have it available. It doesn't really matter at all at this point here. And then last but not least, on our boots and our amulets, if we have it available, we obviously want to temper movement speed. That's going to be pretty much it for levels 35 to 55. Don't forget to pick your Paragon board at level 50. It's going to be in the next section of this guide if you want to skip ahead. And after that, we are just going to do the Capstone Dungeon. So for this Paragon board, we don't really have any glyphs available. If you have a glyph available, like Elementalist, for example, which you can squeeze in on level 1, or for example, Territorial is also a possible glyph you can use at level 1. You can squeeze it in here, but if you don't, just, ignore the glyph socket. And then we're just going to pick up the non-fizz damage nodes and the all resistance and max life nodes everywhere. And then we want to get Burning Instinct. So Burning Instinct is going to give us a good amount of extra damage for our burning damage. It just shows 70% here, but it's less than you would usually have because I'm using an empty character here. And then, we just get some more of these damage nodes and some damage reduction nodes. And this is going to be our Paragon board, which is pretty much going to be fine for the Capstone Dungeon. At this stage, we shouldn't have any issue with the Capstone Dungeon at all. Just in the last Capstone, we switched back from Mage's Firewall to Wizard's Firewall, and we're also going to put in the Hydra enchantment instead of the Fireball enchantment. Other than that, there's just one hint I can give you: max out your fire resistance. So Elias can definitely one-shot you if you don't have good fire resistance. So it's really easy. Just use the natural resistance tempering receipt, for example, or just put some rubies in your jewelry and just max out your fire resistance, and you're going to have a very easy time doing this. Also, if you want to see the full Capstone Dungeon run at level 50, you can check that out in the description down below as well. And just like that, we are already in World Tier 4, so let's go on, do some final Helltide leveling, and then start farming the pit. When we arrive at World Tier 4 Helltides at level 55, it's not gonna be a huge issue. We gotta do a little bit of kiting at the very beginning until we got like Ancestral gear, but it's not gonna be a big deal at all. One more important thing we wanna do is we wanna go to the main Helltide event and we wanna kill the Blood Maiden. There's gonna be enough players which are going to help us doing that, but basically what it does is, and I hope they don't patch it, it will drop you 925 gear. So you want to farm the Blood Maiden for as long until you have a 925 stuff. A 925 stuff is basically instantly going to enable you to do whatever you want, and you're not going to have any issues with running the pit whatsoever. So since we are playing with level 1 glyphs, because we're not going to do Nightmare Dungeons, we're going to do the Nightmare Dungeons at level 100, so we can just do a couple of tier 100s to max out our glyphs. This Paragon board basically is based on having level 1 glyphs, so it might look a little bit weird for you. You might not even have all the glyphs available, but that's fine, you know, it's not going to be a huge deal. So first board, we want to try to get the Elementalist, because we just want to get the extra 15% damage we can get for the intelligence right from this board. Then the next board is still our Burning Instinct board, which we mainly use to buff our burning damage. And then we put in our Tactician glyph here, the 125%. This is a level 1 glyph, right? So it's not going to be a huge benefit, but it's still going to give us the 10% extra damage after casting a defensive spell. We still take advantage of these burning damage modifiers. And then we move over to the next board, which is going to be the Ceaseless Conduit. And we just put our Territorial in here. Again, we can get 25 dexterity in radius with a level 1 glyph. And we pick up these damage to elites movement speed nodes here. Moving over, this is the Enchantment Master board. Again, we pick up all the non-fizz and life nodes here. And then we put in our Torch glyph. This is also a level 1 glyph we can feed with 25 willpower, so it's just going to give us another 12% damage here. And then moving over to our last board, that's going to be the Searing Heat. We mainly pick up these fire damage modifiers here, and then we put in our Adept glyph. We can again, on a level 1 glyph, get 40 intelligence, so it's going to give us 20% increased area for our Firewall. And then we just pick up some more random damage nodes here, and that's pretty much already going to be it for like a glyphless Paragon board. Obviously, this is just like a complete example. You can completely change it if you want, but this is like a pass which you could go, for example. So now we're going to enter the last stage of farming 60 to 100. So first thing we want to do is we have to do a tier 45 Nightmare Dungeon. I don't have footage of this, but I'm pretty sure you're going to handle a tier 45 Nightmare Dungeon without any problems. After finishing the tier 45 Nightmare Dungeon, you're going to port to Seriga, and then you can open a portal to the pit. So we're going to run the pit level 1. And as you can see, the monster level for pit level 1 is level 100. We are just level 68, so we are getting enough experience, and we can stay on this level until we are like level 90, no problem. You can advance in tiers of the pit once your gear gets better, once you get it like a little bit more masterworked and everything, but you don't have to. You're gonna get plenty of XP doing this. And just like this, you can grind the pit until level 100. It's gonna be still a little bit of a grind, but level 100 is always gonna be some kind of a grind no matter what. You might, however, want to switch to a better build which is faster in farming the pit at a certain point of time. So once you found like good items with greater affixes and you got all your aspects, you might, for example, switch to Blizzard, which I highly recommend. And I will have a Blizzard guide out for you very soon for this. So if you look at the footage right now, I switched to Blizzard at, I think, like level 75, and it's significantly faster than Firewall, but don't get me wrong, Firewall is still just going to be fine. And if you're interested in watching a complete tier 1 pit finished with Firewall, I also have that video linked in the description down below. And there you have it, that's my ultimate level 1 to 100 leveling guide for Eternal Realm and Season 4. I hope you enjoy it, and I see you guys next time.